Richard Brooks is an investigative journalist at Private Eye magazine, whose praises I have been singing all morning, not least because they were across this story before it was fashionable. And Richard joins me now. Back, I think, in about 2011, Richard, when Private Eye started covering this issue. When and how did you begin to appreciate the unprecedented scale of the problem?
Well, it was good morning. Back in 2011, we first picked up on this story, and I was just looking at the piece we wrote actually just before speaking to you. It came, as you probably mentioned, Computer Weekly magazine had written some pieces about the story from about 2009. Nick Wallace had done a couple of programs for the BBC, local investigative program. And having discovered a cluster of cases, I think, in the southeast, in the Surrey and Hampshire area, including Joe Hamilton, who was so prominent in the drama, and he said to us, you hang on, maybe you should take a look at this as well. So we did. We'd spent years writing about dodgy IT programs. They were dating from the sort of mid-90s, where almost every government department or public body decided that they'd solve all their problems by throwing billions or millions at IT companies, which is what the Department of Social Security had done with the Post Office, and they had this botched IT contract on their hands. They wasted about 700 million quid. It was a complete write-off, but the government decided, the new Labour government at the time decided that they needed to salvage something from the mess, and that is what the Horizon system was. So from the word go, it was a bit of a disaster.
Did you, or would you have expected? And I'm glad you've mentioned Computer Weekly and Nick Wallace. Did there come a point? And I know that you're a sober bunch over at Private Eye, but did there come a point where you were frustrated or surprised that it hadn't picked up wider momentum?
Yeah, right from the outset, really. By the time we were looking at it, Alan Bates had already got together quite a large group of sub-postmasters with the same problem. I mentioned the first piece we wrote, and in that we were quoting James Arbuthnot, the MP who was then MP, Joe Hamilton's MP, who was saying, it can't be right that all these postmasters are dishonest. It's either them being dishonest or a dodgy computer system. I know which one I suspect. And there's also a line in that first piece we did saying, Ed Davey, who Postal Services Minister, simply washes his hands of the affair. So that's become a big revelation.
Continues to try to do so as well, really, doesn't he? I mean,
exactly. So this was the point. This was the shocking thing at the time, that despite all these cases, the government was just it was washing its hands of it. It was just taking Post Office's word for what was happening, and without any scepticism, without thinking, oh, well, Post Office would say that. They've got a massive interest.
You'd think there'd be a threshold, wouldn't you? You'd think, well, hang on. I mean, maybe there were 50 dodgy sub-postmasters out there, but I can't believe there's 100 or 200 or 407 or 700. But there never was. There was never a point at which antennae within the Post Office or within government started twitching.
No, they only had to look at their statistics, their own statistics on prosecutions. I haven't got exact numbers here, but they shot right up when Horizon came in. So there was no sort of reality check there saying, have people suddenly got dishonest? One of the shortfalls somebody had was £1 million. Yeah. And they were turning over a few £1,000s a week. It was crazy. It was pretty clearly, obviously, the IT system, even if you didn't know about the bugs.
Yeah.
But of course, inside, they actually did know about the bugs. The rest of us outside were sort of scratching our heads thinking, come on, what's going on here? This can't be right.
How do you personally feel about impact that the drama has had? Because I'm glancing at, I've got all the screens in my studio, which you visited, Richard. You know what the studio looks like.
Yeah.
So we've got all three news channels running. They've all got three different sub-postmasters telling their story. I mean, it has absolutely exploded. Even Rishi Sunak was talking about it yesterday, albeit that he got the dates a bit mixed up. I mean, there must be an element of better late than never for you, but also an element of good grief, you know.
Yeah.
Why does Toby Jones succeed where we have failed?
Yeah. I mean, yes, of course, it's great to see that this may be accelerating the process of justice for hundreds of people. Let's hope it does. But yeah, as you say, it is a bit depressing that all this information has been out there for years, and it's taken a drama to make people realise it's important. I mean, that is a bit of an indictment of our government, certainly the current government. You know, it's not as if it was just Private Eye and Computer Weekly and the others who've been writing about this for years. For several years, there's been some very good coverage of this in the Tory House newspaper, in the Mail. Tom Witherow in the Mail has written some great stuff over the last few years. So they've known full well about it. It's been right in their face. But for some reason, it takes a drama. I think there's something about the drama. Obviously, makes the victims of this very human. You just can't ignore it. And I think what that says is that they were actually dehumanizing these people before that was put right on their TV screens. These were people without very loud voices, working class people, and big bureaucracy. To a big bureaucracy and a government, they were just a bit awkward. It was very messy. Doing anything would obviously open things up and create a bit of a stir. So it was much better to try to fob them off for decades.
And a word, if you would, on Paula Fennells. How culpable is she? Her role seems to be pretty grim.
It does. She presided over some very, very grim behaviour. You know, a lot of lies, misrepresentations, even to a judicial process, even to the litigation that Alan Bates led in that the Post Office told a lot of untruths. She covered up. She it was summarised in that part of the dramatisation where she said, which was verbatim, where she told people, "I need to be told it's okay. I need the evidence to say it's okay." So basically, she wanted to be told everything was fine by people beneath her. So it's a bit like, you know, in a lot of organised crime families, the top person doesn't exactly know the detail, but they pretty much give the message about what needs to be done. And I think, you know, there are going to be some very awkward questions when she appears before the public inquiry, which should be later this year.
And it's not going anywhere now, this, is it? And finally, Richard Brooks, what should we be looking out for next? What are you beavering away on that could perhaps not of similar scale in terms of scandal, but similar kind of importance, perhaps?
Well, we've got all kinds of stories brewing. I was just looking at one today involving victims of tax fraudsters who HMRC is treating very harshly. People nick their details, claim tax rebates for them, and then HMRC goes after the victim. There's a big scandal there waiting to come out, I think. And the other thing we've talked about before is the trouble on Teesside, where there's a very, very dodgy development going on with lots of people making lots of money, and on which I think there might be some quite big news this week. So
there you go. Watch this space, as they say.
Yeah. Listen to it. Yeah, excellent.
No, if that isn't reason enough to treat yourself to Private Eye magazine every fortnight, then hopefully my ringing endorsement will tip you over the edge. Richard Brooks, investigative journalist at that magazine, who has been covering with colleagues this story since 2011, and very correctly, but also I think for our industry generously acknowledging the role that other people have played in that. Computer Weekly, I've said to you quite a few times that the trade press has now stepped into the breach that was once occupied by the national newspapers. National newspapers obsessed with opinion and othering and stoking up culture wars, whereas the trade press really does dig into the weeds of stuff in the way that Private Eye does. Although, as Richard reminded us, Tom Witherell at the Mail deserves credit, and Nick Wallace perhaps as much, if not more than anybody else, pursuing this really with the sort of tenacity that I think at one point it's all he did. He covered the court case almost as a freelancer. I think he did actually just sit in court for months on end, covering it in ways that the rest of the media was not doing. What an astonishing personal vindication for him. We should probably talk to him this week, but I imagine an awful lot of people are beating a path to his